Hi, I wanted to do this video to correct a couple of misconceptions about or concerning a video that I did a couple of months back in relation to protein needs for muscle growth. I made a couple of statements in that video that were misinterpreted by some of the people that saw it, judging by the comments that were left under the video that was posted on YouTube. For example, in that video, well, first let me start off to make it very clear that when you're considering protein needs, you have to separate protein needs for strictly muscle growth versus protein needs for health. In that video, I admit I failed to kind of differentiate the two, and this led to some confusion to some of the people watching it. And another factor that came into play was the fact that there's so much publicity about the need for a high protein diet, and bodybuilders, strength athletes, or anyone who wants to add muscle mass and strength. There's so much publicity that a lot of this publicity is generated by companies that have ulterior motives, in the sense that they want you to take more and more protein to, of course, increase their profits. As a consequence, they kind of suggest that, bodybuilders need to take fairly massive amounts of protein, sometimes 250, 300 or more grams a day of protein. And the question is that much protein really necessary to produce muscle? Again, we have to be very clear here. We're talking about building muscle versus other uses of protein in the body. Now, what basically determines muscle growth is the difference between muscle protein synthesis and breakdown. When you're at rest, muscle protein breakdown actually exceeds muscle protein synthesis. For muscle protein synthesis to occur, something has to stimulate it. Of course, the greatest stimulus is exercise. And it turns out that muscle protein synthesis is very sensitive to exercise. So it's a combination of exercise and protein intake. Those are the two things that result in muscle hypertrophy or growth. So, okay, now there was in that particular video, I made a statement. This was the controversial statement that was completely misinterpreted. I talked about a study where varying doses of protein were given to young men who were engaged in a weight training program. Now, in the weight training program they did, it's important to point out they only did about 3 or 4 leg exercises. That was the entire workout. They didn't train their upper body. There was no bench presses, no curls, just a couple of leg exercises. Now, what they gave these young men, they gave varying doses of egg protein, anywhere from 0 to 10 to 20 to, I believe, 40 grams of protein in the form of egg protein. And they did very careful measurements. The way they measured the protein usage in these young men was not available years ago. The measures of protein usage years ago were very indirect. And it's because of those indirect measures that the suggestion of taking much greater intake of protein, that's where it originally came from, because it was thought that you needed a lot more protein because your body didn't process it all, so you had to take in a lot of protein. So this particular study used the latest methods of testing to see exactly how much. They used what they call tracer mechanisms, where they were able to measure the actual amino acid uptake in muscle and the resulting muscle protein synthesis. Now, all things being equal, if you have greater muscle protein synthesis, usually that equals greater muscle hypertrophy or size. There is a relationship. There's a direct relationship. Well, in this study, and as I pointed out in that video that I did, they found that the maximum amount of protein to stimulate muscle protein synthesis, and again, I keep emphasizing muscle protein synthesis, not other kinds of protein synthesis, muscle synthesis, that was 20 grams of protein. The difference between 20 grams of protein provided the same level of, was equal to 89% of an increase in protein synthesis compared to 40 grams. So, in other words, 40 grams is only slightly more of a impetus to muscle protein synthesis than 20 grams. So, based on that, they said that the ideal amount for weight training or somebody who wants to build muscle is to get 20 grams per meal, right? Now, here's where the confusion lies. I was kind of rushed in that video. People who have commented that I was rushed in the video. I only had a certain amount of time and I couldn't explain it properly. And that's the reason for this video. Uh, the main misinterpretation was I wasn't saying that you could only absorb 20 grams of protein. What I was saying was you can only use, and I have to amend this statement too, by the way, which we'll do in a moment. 20 grams of protein was the amount of protein found to maximally stimulate muscle protein synthesis. Any more than that wasn't used for muscle protein synthesis. It was oxidized or used for other purposes. And I didn't explain it fully. And people came away thinking, well, he's saying that you can't use more than 20 grams of protein at a time and anything else is wasted. That was a mistaken notion. I should have been more clear on that. I'm going to clarify it now. Here's the flat statement. First, there's two parts. The first thing is what they've discovered through scientific experiments is there an effect called the muscle full effect. What this means is that a trained muscle, like, you know, when you work out, you're training your muscles. Do I need to explain that? Anyway, a trained muscle can only use a certain amount of amino acids. There is not an unlimited uptake of amino acids. When it gets to a certain point, the muscle cannot accept any more amino acids. They've given infusions where they've actually given IV infusions where they infused amino acids directly into subjects for 6 straight hours. In the first half hour, there was no muscle protein synthesis at all. Then it started to go up at the 30 to 60 minute mark, and by the 2-hour mark, it stopped. In other words, even though the amino acids were infused for 6 hours, after 2 hours, there was no more muscle protein synthesis. This is what is meant by muscle full effect, meaning no matter how much protein you throw at the muscle, there's only a certain amount that's going to be used for muscle protein synthesis. This is the muscle full effect. Okay, here's where it ties in with the misconception of the last video. In that video, again, a lot of people thought I was saying you can only absorb 20 grams of protein. Incorrect. What I was saying was 20 grams in that particular study was found to be the maximal amount to stimulate muscle protein synthesis after training one area of the body, the thighs. It didn't involve other muscle groups. No one has tested to see if, let's say you train your thighs, your back, whatever, several muscle groups at once. That has not been tested. That may well require a lot more than 20 grams. We already know that if you're over 40 years old, you got to have more than 20 grams. The amount for a person who's over 40 years old, and this has to do with something called anabolic resistance, where it's harder for the muscle to uptake amino acids. If you're over 40, you have to take in 40 grams of protein. So there's already a difference right there. But here's where the misconception kind of came in. I wasn't saying, or maybe I should have been clearer, I wasn't saying you can only absorb 20 grams of protein per meal. How much can you absorb? There is no limit. There's no limit. If you take in 200 grams of protein in a meal, you'll absorb 200 grams of protein. Here's the key point, though. Will all 200 grams of protein be used for muscle protein synthesis? In other words, will it be used to build muscle size? The answer is absolutely not. So, okay, what is the fate of that excess protein? In other words, if you can only use 20 grams, or let's say actually the exact figure is, and you want to remember this, is 0.4 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. That's the ideal amount of protein to maximally synthesize muscle protein synthesis, or to maximally stimulate muscle protein synthesis. So in a 91 kilogram man, that's about 200 pounds, that would come out to 36 grams of protein. Again, more than 20 grams. The people in that study were not very big. They were, kind of small college students. A bigger bodybuilder is going to need more protein after the workout. So a 200 pound, and if a guy, one of these guys who competes in the Olympia, a guy like Big Ramy, you can imagine just to figure out 315 pounds, he's going to need a lot more protein to maximally stimulate muscle protein synthesis after workout. So again, it goes by your body weight, right? But there is a limit. That's my point. There is a limit. So you say, okay, what happens to all that protein? If I'm eating, let's use a more realistic figure. if I consume 100 grams, which is possible, if you eat about a pound of meat, you're getting 90 to 100 grams of protein. Now, when I eat that pound of meat, what's happening to that 100 grams? Let's say I eat it after a workout. Well, first of all, it's going to take time to digest. It's going to take a couple hours to digest. You're not going to get the amino acids right away anyway, right? Now, what's going to happen is about, again, depending on your weight, anywhere from 20 to 40 grams of the protein will be used to speed or be utilized for muscle protein synthesis, which means stimulating muscle growth. What happens to the other 80 grams? The other 80 grams, in the previous video, I suggested that the excess protein that you consume in meals will have an anti-catabolic effect. It'll be stored in what they call amino acid pools in the liver and the blood and other tissues of the body, where the body can kind of pull out the amino acids as needed. This is thought to be the way that vegetarians stay alive, because they often don't eat enough protein, but if they eat enough protein in the course of a day, that the amino acids will be in that amino acid pool, and the body could pull out could pull out amino acids as needed for various reasons. Now, here's an important point. Okay, what is the fate of the excess of protein you eat in meals? Again, I will emphasize, there's no limit to how much protein can be absorbed from a meal, and different proteins are absorbed at different rates. Some proteins, like whey protein, are absorbed much faster than, let's say, food proteins like beef and eggs, that kind of thing. Your body has a certain rate limit to how much protein it can absorb, but it will absorb all of it eventually, unless there's certain pathology existent, like lack of protease enzymes to break down the protein, lack of hydrochloric acid. That's a whole different story. We're talking about normal people here, right? Besides the anti-catabolic effect, here's what's going to happen to all that protein you eat. A minimal amount, again, related to that 20 to 40 grams, that will be used for actually building muscle through muscle protein synthesis. What's the rest of it going to do? It's going to be used for whole body protein metabolism, which means not muscle, but skin's protein, hormones are protein, your neurotransmitters in the brain are protein. All these protein-based things are going to be, that protein will be used for them. But here's the key point. That 100 grams of protein you're eating in the meal is not all going to be used for muscle building. This is where people go wrong, where they don't understand. They think that they'll absorb all that protein and all of it's going to go directly to muscle. That's not true. Only a small amount, 20 to 40 grams, will be used for actual building muscle. But that doesn't mean that you're wasting the protein. Again, the rest of the protein will be used as needed by the body. Now, if your body doesn't need all that protein, for example, your intestinal cells, the lining of your intestine, and those cells slough off every 3 days, and you have to have protein to replace that. Now, if it's in a situation where the intestinal cells need protein, your body actually will take the protein you eat in food and use it to replenish those cells, right? Now, the main amino acid used, coincidentally, by the way, is glutamine. Glutamine's the main amino acid used to help replenish that intestinal cells. But that's a whole different story. But the point is, though, that only the fate of excess protein ingested in a meal will be used for non-muscle protein tissues in the body. And any protein that's not used by the non-muscle protein tissues of the body will be broken down in a process called deamination, or it will also be oxidized in the liver. The odds of you getting fat from eating excess protein, if you're active, if you work out, are nil. It almost never happens. Don't believe, I've said this before. The odds of they've given bodybuilders in a study, they gave them 5 times more protein than is required to build muscle. There was not one drop of fat synthesized. So this doesn't apply if you're sitting on your ass watching TV or playing video games or playing with your smartphone and never moving. If you eat a lot of protein there's a chance some of these amino acids can be converted into glucose. Glucose can be converted into fat. That's you can possibly get fat. I'm not saying it's impossible. and I didn't say that statement in the first video, and I'm amending that now. It's not impossible to get fat from excess protein. It's just not likely if you're active. Very unlikely if you're active. If you're sedentary, possible, not likely. Okay? All right, let's move on to something else. All right, I just want to mention that study I did mention, since we're talking about beef, they actually did test the amount of protein used, so muscle protein synthesis in a beef meal. The meal contained what was it? I think it was a pound of beef. I think it was, and 90 grams of protein. They figured it had, and another group got a smaller serving of beef that it contained 30 grams of protein, and they found that both servings of beef increased muscle protein synthesis by 50% above normal. 50%. Now, the interesting thing about this was not after working out. These people were sedentary. They weren't even working out. But just taking in the high concentrated protein was enough to increase protein synthesis by 50%. But the key point is that the 90-gram protein meal and the 30-gram protein meal both increase protein synthesis by muscle protein synthesis, I should say. I'm sorry, wait, it wasn't even muscle protein synthesis. It was a whole body protein synthesis. It was not muscle protein synthesis. It increased protein synthesis by 50% above baseline. So made no difference whether you have 30 or 90 grams of protein. So again, there's a limit on how much protein can be used, right? Okay, so now what about the, how does this, there's a confusing issue that arises here because, I mean, think about it. If they're telling you to take 30 to 40 grams of protein, I mean, that doesn't really equal a lot of protein by the end of the day. And yet other texts and articles about protein requirements for athletes, I mean, the range of protein suggested is 1.5 to 2.0, 1.5 to 2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. Now, in a 91 kilogram athlete or bodybuilder, that's about 200 pounds again, that comes out to 136 grams of protein. And yet if you're getting 200 grams, I mean, if you're aiming for 20 grams of protein per meal, even if you have 5 meals, that's 100 grams of protein. Now, it's confusing though. So what are they saying? Should you get 100 grams? Should you get 20 grams of protein in 5 meals? Now, by the way, if you do that, you want to space them out about at least every 3 to 4 hours, because the muscle fold, remember, it peaks at 3 hours. So you want to wait more than 3 hours to get your next protein meal. You can wait a maximum of 5 hours. So at least every 5 hours, you want to, if you want maximal protein synthesis, you want to eat some form of protein. And again, it doesn't have to be a lot. It could be as little as 20 to 30 to 40 grams of protein. Protein bar would do it. You don't have to have it, or whey drink. You don't have to eat a whole meal, right? That will maximize muscle protein synthesis, and in turn will maximize muscle hypertrophy or growth, right? Now, the thing is, okay, getting back to this, now, if we eat, using the 20 gram figure, 5 meals will give us 100 grams of protein, right? Yet they're saying that a 200-pound man needs 136 grams of protein. Well, that's the minimum figure. The upper figure at 2 grams would be about 182 grams of protein. All right, let's use the 182. Let's figure it's you're training really hard. You're on a low-carb diet. Your calories are reduced. You have to go for not the lower figure of 1.5. You have to go for the 2 grams because you have to increase your protein when you're on a low-calorie or low-carb diet. So let's use the 2-gram figure. We're talking about 182 grams of protein. It's 182 versus 100. What's missing here? Okay, now here's the answer. For muscle protein synthesis, again, it would come out to only about a little over 100, maybe 130 grams of protein maximal. That will cover muscle protein synthesis, the muscle growth. What about the rest of that 182 grams of protein? That's your whole body protein usage. That's to help replenish your connective tissue, your tendons, your hormones, again, your skin, your intestinal cells, your red blood cells. That's where the rest of the protein comes from, because you got to have that protein every day, because your body uses protein every day. And when you're an athlete or somebody working out, you're going to be breaking down more protein everywhere, not just in your muscles. Everywhere you're going to be breaking down more protein. So that's how that comes into play, right? Okay, now let's talk about, let's see, what am I moving on to? Okay, another controversy is what they call nutrient timing. A couple of people have criticized nutrient timing. They've noted that the studies show that protein synthesis actually goes on for 24 to 48 hours following a workout. Therefore, the notion of having to consume protein immediately after the workout, like has been advised for a long time. As soon as you work out, you want to get that whey, and you want to get that carbs in you. These newer studies or some of these researchers are saying that's bogus, because protein synthesis, again, occurs over a much longer time span, 24 to 48 hours. Okay, the problem with that is that it differs between advanced men and beginners. Believe it or not, beginners actually have an extended protein synthesis time. The protein synthesis in a beginner goes on for 48 hours. But if you're an advanced person defined by at least a year or more of training, the protein synthesis peaks at 24 hours. So the more advanced you are, the more protein you want to take in at a more rapid pace. In other words, you don't want to slow it down and spread it out over 2 days, whereas a beginner could, right? And there's another thing to consider is, remember, you've just worked out and you want to increase recovery, right? So in other words, you've damaged the protein. To gain muscle size, you have to incur a certain amount of muscle damage. Now, why would you wait a couple of hours to ingest protein, which is going to be used to repair that damage, when you can have protein within a reasonable amount of time? It doesn't have to be immediate, within, let's say, an hour or two after the workout. Wouldn't you want to get that protein in there fast to repair the damage, to speed your recovery? Another thing to consider is that you want to have some carbohydrate. Carbohydrate is not necessary to ingest with protein after a meal. If your only goal is muscle protein synthesis, you do not need carbohydrate. That's a fact. Because if you're taking a protein source such as whey, the reason they used to tell people to have carbohydrate with protein after workout is because the carbohydrate was thought to increase insulin more than protein alone, right? And insulin has an anti-catabolic effect, and in the presence of large amounts of amino acids, it does stimulate protein synthesis, right? But more recent studies show that whey is so loaded with amino acids, and some of these amino acids, such as leucine, are actually potent insulin secretagogues, in the sense that they will raise insulin on their own without any extra carbohydrate. They will raise insulin enough to maximize the insulin effect after the workout, so you do not need to add carbs if your goal is only muscle protein synthesis. Now, but wait a minute. You've also, when you work out, you break down muscle glycogen, which is carbohydrate and stored muscle. That's the primary fuel to fuel your workouts. That's what your muscles use for energy, the glycogen stored in your muscle. I mean, wouldn't it be a good idea to take in some carbs after the workout? Your glycogen synthetase enzyme, it's called. That enzyme, that's the rate limiting enzyme for glycogen synthesis. In other words, if you provide carbohydrates at the right time, which is right after the workout, the stimulus of the workout stimulates this enzyme, and so does insulin, by the way, and it causes a more rapid replenishment of carbohydrate or I should say glycogen in the muscle. So actually, it's a good idea to take carbohydrate right after the workout, not for muscle building purposes, but for glycogen replenishment purposes. Why would you wait? Why would you kind of hold back your recovery by not taking in carbs for a couple hours? Because after a couple of hours, the glycogen synthetase enzymes, it goes down in activity. So the glycogen won't be as replenished as fast. Why wouldn't you take advantage of that little window of opportunity? No, it's not going to build extra muscle, but it will replenish glycogen, which is important. You also want to make sure you have adequate hydration. You got to take those fluids after the workout. Because again, after the workout, your body is craving fluids for various reasons, including the hydrations involved in the muscle protein synthesis effects by themselves. So for those reasons, I think I still believe in taking nutrients in. Again, it doesn't have to be, you don't have to like run to the whatever, refrigerator and start downing away, or take a big can of protein with you to the gym. I'm saying within a reasonable time, 1 to 2 hours, I still think it's a good idea to have some protein and carbs, and the ratio would be about, I'd say about 2 to 1, maybe twice as much carbohydrate as protein will more than meet the needs of And again, you want to take in, as far as the exact amount of protein, depending on your weight, your age, it would be between 20 and 40 grams right after the workout. Okay, so here's another trick. I mentioned that, for maximum muscle protein synthesis, it's a good idea to have like really smaller protein meals more often, because again, you have that muscle full effect where if you try and overload your body with protein, the muscles aren't going to accept the amino acids. It's just they're full. It's like trying to pour glass in a water that's already full. So you have to wait a couple hours between meals. For that reason, you want to have small meals more often, right? Now, some of you might be thinking, now, wait a minute, hold on a second. I don't have time to eat 6 meals a day. I mean, honestly, when I competed as a bodybuilder in those days, we were always told to have as many small meals as possible. Some guys were eating 8 to 12 meals a day. I could not do it. I was going to school, I was working. I could never, ever, even with protein drinks, I just couldn't fit in 6 meals a day. The most meals I ever ate were 4, quite honestly. And even there, 1 or 2 of them were always protein drinks. So I had like 2 meals and 2 protein drinks. And strangely enough, even today, I only have like 2 meals and 2 protein drinks. So it's a habit I'm still doing, by the way. Now, but you say, well, wait a minute, I need to get that protein in there. I want to maximize muscle protein synthesis. Well, here's a little trick. They did a study where they gave subjects two doses of protein. One of them was 25 grams of whey, which is about the ideal amount for muscle protein synthesis, and the other was only 6.25 grams of whey, and then the third group also got 6.25 grams of whey, but they also, in addition to that, they also got 5 grams of leucine. Leucine is a branched chain amino acid, which is considered the key amino acid for stimulating muscle protein synthesis for reasons that are way too complicated to get into in this video. But anyway, just remember, leucine's the key. Anyway, the group that got 6.25 grams of protein with 5 grams of added leucine, they showed as much muscle protein synthesis as taking in 25 grams of whey. So in other words, if for some reason you can't ingest a lot of protein, be aware of the fact that if you add, it doesn't have to be 5, it could be like 2.8 grams of whey to a smaller protein meal, you're going to maximize the muscle protein, even if it contains fewer. Let's say it only contained 15, 20 grams of protein. By adding a little leucine, let's say, again, 2.5, 2.8 grams, you're going to, that meal, it'll be like eating 40 grams of protein as far as muscle protein synthesis. So it's a little trick to maximize muscle protein synthesis. And as I said in the earlier video, if you're over 40 or older, you have the anabolic resistance effect. If you take in a little extra leucine, again, about 2.5 grams, especially between meals, a little bit after that 3-hour window, or even during the 3-hour window, if you take in 2.5 grams of leucine with some amino acids, essential amino acids, you're going to maximize protein synthesis, and you will overcome the anabolic resistance to the extent that you will be having a muscle protein synthesis at about the same level as a person 20 years old. So that's a little trick for you there, right? Okay, let's see what else I wanted to cover here. That's about it for protein. I just wanted to clarify. I can go on and on, and I promised myself I wouldn't make this long, drawn-out video. So I think that about covers the protein situation. Again, real briefly, the best protein is whey protein. The best form of whey protein is whey protein isolate. Whey protein hydrolysates are pre-digested forms that are absorbed a lot faster. They're a little bit better for anti-catabolic purposes, preventing muscle protein breakdown. Again, they stimulate a little bit better recuperation, but the truth is they're also oxidized much faster than the amino acids contained in whey protein isolate. So always go with whey protein isolate. Do not buy any whey products that have added amino acids to it. You'll see it, a lot of these things on the label, they feature added taurine, added glutamine. Those are what they call amino acid or protein spike products. What they're doing is they're artificially raising the nitrogen level of the protein. The bottom line is you're getting less protein, actual protein per serving. It's about half as much as reflected on the label, because it's the nitrogen they're adding those amino acids and artificially elevating the nitrogen so they can get away with saying they're still giving you 25 grams of protein per serving when in fact it's half that much. Do not buy a protein that has added amino acids. Whey protein is absolutely loaded with amino acids. There's no reason other than amino acid spiking to add amino acids to extra amino acids to a whey protein. You're being ripped off. Don't buy it. Buy 100% whey product only. Okay, just want to talk a little bit about my newsletter, Applied Metabolics. I still believe it's the best source of information anywhere. People who know me know I wrote for the magazines for years, bodybuilding magazines. I was the science editor of Muscle and Fitness for 10 years in the 90s. I wrote thousands of articles. And believe me, I'm looking at you in the eye if I could see you. I'm working harder on this newsletter to produce absolute truth and fact than I've ever done in any of the magazines. I was always held back in the magazines by advertising constraints. Now I'm letting it all hang out. I'm telling you the truth. I have no advertisements. I have nothing to hold me back. I'm telling the truth. There are some publications only cover nutrition. Others there's a couple that cover exercise only. I cover nutrition, exercise science, anti-aging, hormone therapy, fat loss techniques, ergogenic aids, other topics, even sometimes sexuality. I haven't done it yet, but I probably will, because a lot of men are interested in that stuff. With the Cialis and Viagra, and they're having problems. I'll cover ways that will improve even that type of situation. Right? There's nobody in the entire field that can match me in experience. I've been doing this stuff or researching it for over 50 years. Nobody even comes close, not even close, right? And the next issue of, just to give you an example, in the October issue of Applied Metabolics, which is coming out October 1st, it'll be available October 1st, I'm going to have a definitive article on a popular topic, intermittent fasting. I know that, listen, before I did the article, I went on the web and I checked the extent of information about intermittent fasting is vast. I mean, there's entire websites devoted to it. There's all kinds of techniques and methods and that. The problem is it's that it gets confusing. You don't know the best ways to do it. You don't know the drawbacks. You don't know how very few tell how it affects muscles. My article on intermittent fatting, what is intermittent fatting? Anyway, I think that's like the hula hoop. Anyway, the thing is, I'll be talking about how intermittent fasting, the emphasis will be on people into fitness, health, bodybuilding. How does it affect you? Is it a really good way to lose body fat? Will it adversely affect muscle? Will it adversely affect energy? How to best use it in a way that it will allow you to retain muscle while losing body fat. And I'll also talk about the health effects, which are just absolutely very, very surprising. There's really a good amount of data which indicates that if done properly, a good program of intermittent fasting can add many years to your life if it's done right. And it could also ward off cardiovascular disease, brain disease, cancer, a whole bunch of things. It's all going to be in that article. Very definitive, very extensive. Another article in the October issue is I'm going to talk, I don't like to give out steroid programs. That's not my bag. I'm not some sort of steroid guru. I don't want anyone approaching me asking for steroid programs. I am not a doctor. I don't try and make believe I'm a doctor. And 99% of the people that give out those steroid programs don't know their ass from their elbow. They're giving out dangerous programs, but that's another story. But what I'm trying to say is I will discuss relevant information on anabolic steroids. And in this issue, the October issue, I talk about a couple of, the biggest side effects with steroids have to do with the way they affect the cardiovascular system, the liver, and the kidneys. Those three things, those are the hardest hit by high dose steroid. And, nobody has really discussed exactly why steroids do this. So for the first time, I'm going to explain this article, and I'm going to discuss a couple of case histories to clarify and show how this works. I'm going to tell you exactly why high-dose steroids are capable of causing cardiovascular problems, liver problems, and kidney problems. I'm going to tell you, and for the very first time anywhere, I'm going to actually explain the exact reason why high-dose steroids, not testosterone therapy, high dose steroids can, without question, cause severe kidney problems. I'm going to explain why. Nobody's ever talked about this other than these esoteric medical journals. I'm going to talk about it first. So, those are just some of the articles in the next issue. I have tremendous stuff coming up. You'll never see what I'm writing in magazines or on websites because, frankly, to get people to do this, the people that are capable of writing the type of or the level of information that I'm going to be writing would demand a fortune. None of these websites, and trust me, especially the magazines are paying zero. They're not going to get anybody with any brain writing for magazines right now, except the staff guys are still getting a salary. Again, that's another story. You're not going to get this if you trust me. It's Applied Metabolics, www.appliedmetabolics.com. I absolutely guarantee, I don't care who you are, I don't care how smart you are, I don't care if you have 42 doctorates, you'll definitely learn something. If you read my newsletter for a couple of months, you yourself, trust me, will be an expert. I don't care whether you're a trainer or this is for your personal knowledge. You'll know the truth. You'll never be deceived by all the bullshit on the internet and in the magazines. You will know the truth. So trust me, subscribe to this. And anyway, that's it for me. All right, I came in under an hour this time, still a little bit too long, but I hope you guys get some use out of this video. Take care.